Hey, this is Steve Dail, formerly of Project 86 and Starflyer 59, and we are about to discuss metal.
This is the Discuss Metal Podcast with Stephen Dail of Starflyer 59. Hosted by Dan Terry. Presented by discussmetal.com.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Discuss Metal Podcast. My name is Dan, and I am your host for this evening, or pretty much any evening that you're listening to this podcast. And I've got a really fun guest tonight. I have with me Mr. Stephen Dail, formerly of Innermeans, Project 86, and I mean, so many bands. Bands that you played in. Let's see, Starflyer 59, Neon Horse. What was that newer one? White Lighter.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's so much. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing all right. How you doing, Dan?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I just started my vacation, so I'm gonna be pretty chill tonight. I'm not gonna sound like I'm in a hurry, so that is a good thing.
There you go.
Well, I'm super stoked to have you on. We have connected recently on social media, and so there's so much stuff to talk about. So I'm gonna get into it pretty generically. And just ask what got you into music first as a fan, and then secondly as a musician.
Yeah, as a fan, oh man, I would say I was introduced to the Southern California hardcore scene by my older brother, who was into it. And he's 3 years older, and I just kind of got into that whole scene, and that's really what did it for me as far as, transitioning from a passive music fan of, whatever was popular when I was a kid, like say Nirvana or whatever was on the radio, into kind of a, specific music scene and stuff. So that's where it started for me. And then that grew into, you know what, everybody else is starting a band and I want to do the same. So I just started learning how to play bass. I think I was 14. May not be exactly right, but somewhere around there. Started taking lessons, and then that kind of slowly began into finding dudes to jam with, and yeah, from there on out, I've kind of been doing it ever since.
Well, so what was it about bass that attracted you to it, instead of keyboard or flute or drums or something?
Yes, that's a great question. I guess it kind of just makes sense with my personality. And in a way, I knew, I didn't really have a need to be in the forefront. I just wanted to play music and be in a band. And at the same time, bass is kind of as far as the rock genre, kind of the most rare position where dudes are legitimate bass players and they care about bass. And it kind of ups your value as far as, being needed or wanted to be play with other dudes. And at the time, I had a friend in junior high who played guitar and my other friend played drums. So it just kind of made sense. Well, I better learn bass. Yeah.
I mean, it's every band needs a bass player. Every band needs a drummer, so,
right.
It's job security, which, looking at your career, I mean, obviously you've had that. Which is awesome. So what were some of the first bands that you started playing in?
First bands, very first band, I don't even think we had a name. That was just a literal garage band where we were, just covering whatever songs we liked at the time. But the first real band, honestly, probably was Innermeans. That was a true band in the sense where we wrote our own songs and played shows and that kind of thing. So that was pretty early on. I'd say I started not long after I learned. I probably was around 15. So give or take 95, we started that. And there was a couple incarnations of that, but it basically just stemmed from meeting dudes at hardcore shows and stuff and becoming friends within that whole scene. And we just formed a band and just started doing it.
There you go. No, that's awesome. I still love that Innermeans EP. So how did you guys get hooked up with Tooth and Nail?
Yeah. So back then, Solid State had just begun. It was brand new. And that EP we did, I'm not exactly sure, but it was within the first, let's say, 5 releases. I think one of them was Living Sacrifice Reborn. And then you had Focal Point, I think, was one of them with the Clark brothers.
Yeah, Focal.
Was
it? I think it was Was Focal Point solid state, or was it? I could just look. I've got one of the records like next to me, but I want to say it was either Training for Utopia or Focal Point. It's something. Ryan Clark was in both, so it's kind of confusing. But.
Yeah, and we were playing with Focal Point, and we were just that whole scene. It was so everyone kind of knew everyone else, and I just remember our bass player at the time, Tim Clark. He lived with his parents. We all lived with our parents. We were like 16 years old or something, and like he just got this on his answering machine. There's Brandon Evo, like, bro, we heard you guys are awesome. Like, we want to put you out on solid state. And we're like, oh, absolutely, let's do it. And just went to the local studio. What was it? Moon Song. Bob Moon, a guy named Bob Moon, owned the studio, and he did a bunch of the early Tooth and Nail stuff, and it was basically a demo. And we just did 4 songs, and that was the EP. But some of those are, especially like Living Sacrifice, like we were pretty out of our depth as far as musicianship when we were kind of got thrown into the pool. I mean, even today, like who is really in the same stratosphere as those guys, right? But
I don't know. I thought it was cool. I mean, I've got the EP, and yeah, it's definitely. I found it in a dollar bin actually for like
that makes sense,
like 50 cents or 75 cents or whatever. And I got all kinds of cool stuff out of there, like really good stuff. But no, I really enjoyed it. Like, I didn't think that it really sounded kind of like it was some kind of like weird transition between like, I know back then you had like the quote unquote spiritual hardcore bands, like your Focused and Strong Arm and stuff like that, or like even like a Focal Point, but this one had a little bit more like, I don't know, like spunk to it, a little bit more energy. Not that those bands weren't energetic, but like unfortunately, those old spirit-filled hardcore records don't age well.
Right.
Whereas the Innermeans one just seemed to me to be more, a little bit more immediate. Like it would be hard to just listen to it and tell what year it came out.
Yeah, that's interesting because we were. I don't know if you're familiar with that band, Unbroken.
Yeah.
From San Diego. Yeah, their record, Life, Love, Regret, was like I still love that thing. Like that was our. We were really influenced by them, and they had a totally different thing, within that scene, but they still fit within the scene. So we were really going for that kind of deal.
It makes a lot of sense, actually. Now that you mentioned it,
right.
I kind of feel the same way. I kind of feel the same way about that record. I was like, yeah, it's kind of hard to tell when this came out. Like I'm thinking mid to late 90s, but I'm not 100% sure.
Somewhere in there, but it's such a cool record, and the production is bizarre. Like it's a mess, and it's like out of time, and they captured something really cool on that record.
So what ended up eventually happening? There aren't a lot of those Tooth and Nail. A lot of Tooth and Nail bands put out, or solid state bands put out an EP and then a full length album. So I would assume that the band kind of just dissipated before that happened.
Yeah, pretty much. Basically, Alex started playing with Schwab and Randy around the same time, actually, in Project 86.
Okay, yeah.
And it Innermeans, like it just kind of, we never really had much ambition to tour or anything. Like I think the furthest we made it was to, like Phoenix a couple times because we were pretty tight with the Overcome guys. Like they were our good friends, and we would play out there. But yeah, it's a little hazy. You have to forgive me. I was like 16, but
no, you're good, man. Nothing, I'm just like, I hope you did all your research on yourself before calling. Yeah, like
yeah. It was nothing dramatic. Like, oh, we broke up, or like it just kind of dissolved pretty much.
All right, so there's not like the singer went to jail for stabbing 4 dudes in a rage. Yeah,
no, nothing that exciting at all. No, it just kind of fizzled out, I guess. But those were good memories, man. We played a ton of local shows, and it was a lot of fun. It was truly a good time.
Did you ever end up doing anything with Bloodshed?
Yeah. So again, around that same time, see, it wasn't uncommon then for guys to be in like 2 or 3 bands.
Sure.
So around that same time, I was playing with the Bloodshed guys, and it was kind of on the tail end of their whole deal. They were kind of a few years ahead of us.
Yeah.
And did that, and we recorded an EP, but it didn't come out under the name Bloodshed. It was I think they changed their name. What did we change their name to? Slingshot David. That's right. And it came out on some random Canadian label, and I don't remember the name at all. And there was, I think it was a 7-inch. And I would love to find, if anybody out there knows where that thing is, I would love to find a copy of that because I don't have one.
Yeah, normally this is where I'm like, oh yeah, dude, I got that on my shelf. But yeah, no, I don't. I'm going to have to.
It's a pretty deep cut, man. That thing, I don't think many people have hanging around.
Well, that's cool. That gives me something else to look for to complete the collection.
I cannot vouch for how good it is. I don't remember, honestly.
Oh, that's all right. If I find it, I'll let you know.
Okay, sounds good.
But yeah, so after that, so did you go immediately, I guess, into Project 86 after that, or was there anything?
Yeah, pretty much. So Ethan Luck was he was the original bass player of Project, and he took off. Quit, didn't want to do it or whatever. And we were still kind of doing Innermeans, and Alex kind of lobbied for me to come in on bass because I played guitar in Innermeans actually. And he brought me in and said, oh, Steve's a good bass player and stuff. And that was my intro into that deal. And so that's when I joined Project. I'm so bad with dates. I would guess 97, I'm guessing.
That sounds about right.
There. Yeah. So that's how that happened.
Okay. So you started playing in Project. Now, the bands that you'd played in before were predominantly like hardcore bands. So to come into Project 86, kind of playing this more, I always used to joke that Project 86 was the quote unquote Christian Rage Against the Machine.
That's how it started for sure.
What was it like, I guess, switching genres like that? Was it something that you wanted to do, or was it just kind of one of those like, well, I'm in this band now and we're playing a relatively popular style, so let's go for it?
Yeah, pretty much. It was something I wanted to do because I kind of felt like a lot of the bands I'd been in up till then were, more on the kind of amateur level in a way. And Project was from day one was kind of set out to be a very professional, legitimate band. And so that was really attractive to me, that they took it really seriously and were really committed to it. And, Schwab always had like legitimate lyrics and that kind of thing. And I was ready to kind of try something a little bit more in the mainstream at that point.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, I either want to play my passion or I want to make actual like some cash for doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly.
And so let's see, Project put out their first record. Was that 98 or 99?
98. Self-titled came out. Yeah.
I know you guys put a demo out before that, which sounded a lot like Rage Against the Machine. I don't have a copy of that, but I think I found it somewhere floating around online. I've got the MP3s on my computer somewhere, but like that sounded so much like Rage Against the Machine. But the self-titled album, the weird thing about that one for me is that it came out on Beck Recordings.
Yeah, that was a weird one. Brand and Evil wanted us to be on BEC. That had just started too. I'm not exactly sure why, but yeah, I couldn't really explain that one. But yeah, it came out on BEC.
Yeah, because I would have figured, like, I mean, I guess in a certain sense, I could see where he's coming from, in that it's not a hardcore band,
right?
But it's also not like, I don't know. I don't think it's like, for lack of a better term, it's not like butt rock enough to come out,
right?
On like, I don't know. It's not punk enough to be on Tooth and Nail, but it's not butt rock enough to be on Beck. I don't know. It's, I guess in his mind at that time, it was just where it was, because I think Beck had like, at least later on, had bands like Cutlass and stuff like that on it. So yeah, I never could tell what the actual aim of that label was.
I think at that time we kind of we were floating, we certainly didn't fit in on the Solid State side of things. But as you said, like, we didn't fit in on the Tooth and Nail side of things at that time either. So I think that was the rationale behind that.
So that first record, what was the reception like whenever that thing first came out? Because this actually predates me. I think I didn't start listening to the band until like Drawing Black Lines, like that era. But then I went back and listened to the self-titled, and I was like, oh, this is different. Like, I still liked it, but it was just like, it's a little bit of a different style. What was the reception like on that? Like, did kids eat it up? Because I can't think of a lot of bands besides maybe like POD at the time that were playing kind of that sort of style.
Right. We had pretty lucky timing, actually, because, I joined the band and a lot of the record had been written. But I was part of writing some of it and recording the record and stuff. And then we went on our first tour and we hit Cornerstone for the first time. And there was a buzz around kind of that genre of heavier music. Like it had started to become a more popular thing. So the reception was pretty good, honestly. I mean, especially that Cornerstone, we sold a ton of that first album. And yeah, generally speaking, it was good. It was better than we expected, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and you guys got Sonny from POD to do guest vocals on that record.
Yeah, right. But well before they turned into what they ended up turning into. So that ended up being a cool thing.
That's funny. Like, kind of a little bit of a side story. I always associate that. This is going to sound really dumb, but I always associate that record with the video game Wolfenstein 3D. If you've ever played that, I had so like by the time like this is like well after that was a new game, obviously, but I was a kid and my parents had like an old computer hooked up in my room. Like it wasn't connected to the internet or anything. And all I could play on it was like Wolfenstein 3D and Doom. And I remember being in high school and playing Wolfenstein 3D and listening to the project self-titled and just for whatever reason, just like, so every time I hear one of those songs, I always like flash back to that game. Like I can see it, you know, in my head.
It's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny how music does that, isn't it? It timestamps things and just connects weird neurons to like random memories. It's really interesting.
It is. So, you know, you guys put that record out and it came out to relatively good success. And then you, I guess one of the questions I've been wanting to ask since, I don't know, probably since like 2002 or something, when I first started listening to the band, what happened between Self-Titled and Drawing Black Lines? Because I mean, it sounds like somebody just like pissed in your guys' Cheerios.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, you know, again, kind of going on somewhat vague memories, like we did the kind of the Self-Titled touring cycle and then went into Drawing Black Lines, and we had just kind of brought in all kinds of new influences, right? And it got away from the rage thing and the like, yeah, it's, you know, we don't really need to do much rapping anymore. That's kind of lame. And, you know, just we kind of experienced a whole new kind of idea of what the band could be in a way. And so like I was, you know, me and Alex really came from the hardcore scene, right? So we started bringing in a lot of that and, you know, got really into kind of bringing in like influences from Sick of It All and that kind of stuff. And we all went to see the Deftones at the Palladium in Hollywood, and the Melvins were opening. And
oh, wow.
It was like, yeah. So like, that was like, dude, there's some cool stuff going on there.
High energy.
And
yeah.
So, yeah. And so that the Melvin stuff kind of like started integrating some of that. And then Refuse Shape of Punk to Come came out, which I loved. I was crazy about that record. So there was some of that thrown in there. We just kind of rethought the whole thing. And I mean, actually, it's funny, like Drawing Black Lines wasn't that like premeditated of a thing, actually. It's just kind of what happened. Because there was no pressure at that time, right? Like me and Randy were 19 when we made that record. Like we had no illusions of having some grand career in music. Like it was just kind of whatever we wanted to do. So
right.
That I think of all the records was the most organic, and we just let it ride. Like whatever was happening, whatever we thought was cool, let's do it, you know?
Sure.
Oh, you know, Garth wants to record, you know, 12 guitar tracks for a song. Like, oh, rad, cool, let's do it. Like nothing was overthought. And I think that comes through on that record. It's a weird record like that.
So what was Garth like as far as I've heard some crazy shit about Garth. You know, from other bands, and you know, so I was always kind of like, well, they put out, you know, Garth did Drawing Black Lines, and yeah, I was kind of wondered like if some of the craziness associated with him transferred over to what you remember. Yeah,
you know, like we did that record fairly quick. Like it was a bang bang thing. We went up to Vancouver. And yeah, he was always just kind of a funny dude. Yeah, we didn't really experience anything crazy, but he was more just kind of took the reins and just let it roll. I mean, there weren't anything like fun stories about him. He's just kind of a quirky dude that we actually had a lot of fun with him. He was pretty fun to work with, and we ended up working with him again later. So.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I've heard some insane stories about how like he would just put like porn magazines up like all over the studio, and like just to like, and everybody's like, I can't play because I'm too distracted, like by everything that's going on.
Yeah. There's a lot of that kind of craziness, especially back then with any rock producer. They were doing weird stuff like that. That doesn't surprise me, I guess.
Yeah. I think it was one of those things where like he had been kind of contracted to talk to like to work with some of these like bands that were in like the Christian music scene. And I think maybe that was just kind of his way of fucking with them, you know, a little bit. Like
totally. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, that sounds believable for sure.
Well, and then Drawing Black Lines ended up like kind of opening a lot of doors for the band.
Yeah,
I mean, that's when I first was introduced to the band. I was I was one of those like card carrying youth group kids, you know, that I was listening to like Skillet and thinking that was like the coolest thing that ever came out. And my friends were like, dude, there's this dude named, or there's this band called Project 86 and like their stuff is super heavy. And I'm like, oh, well, at the time I remember being like, well, you know, I listened to like stuff like Korn and Slipknot. And I think that stuff's the heaviest stuff ever. And they're like, no. You need to hear. And they would always show me the song "Set Me Up" off of Drawing Black Lines, and they're like, tell me that doesn't go toe to toe with Slipknot, you know. And you know, in the back of my mind, I was like, well, it's not really the same thing, but
right,
you know,
right.
But yeah, it's aggressive, it's heavy, it's intense, it's dark, and you know, that's what really drew me into it, you know, as a fan, and I definitely got more into Christian music, I think, at that time. But yeah, I remember like I just watched, I guess probably last week, I watched like a Cornerstone video of like after that record came out, and the crowd and everything was just incredible. So like, was that like a significant kind of bump up as far as like popularity from what you guys had experienced on the self-titled?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was a noticeable difference, and the whole energy surrounding us was different. And of course, I mean, you had Atlantic, a major label, that said, "Oh, we want you guys," and they put that record out. So that was quite a difference as compared to the self-titled record.
Sure. No, that's when I remember the band kind of being at the peak of their popularity was during that time, because. And I remember there being a lot of like, because I'm kind of that guy, and I think I'm still that guy, even though I was that guy back when I was like 15. I'm still that guy in my 30s now, where I'm like, well, what else you guys got, you know? So I remember, you know, hearing that the band had signed to Atlantic Records like fully. I know Atlantic had like a piece of the pie on Drawing Black Lines.
Right.
But, you know, as far as like whenever you guys ended up putting out Truthless Heroes, that was all Atlantic, as far as I know. Yeah.
I think Tooth and Nail like licensed it for the Christian market.
Yeah,
that still existed back then, where there were, you know, bookstores and stuff. But yeah, it was fully an Atlantic record for sure.
So was that kind of like a different experience for you as far as going into like, because I know like, and I have very limited experience being in the Christian scene. Like I was in a band for, you know, 8 minutes, and you know, like and was kind of in that scene. That's a totally different experience as far as like kind of breaking into like kind of a mainstream sort of deal. So did you initially feel any type of like pressure as far as like what you needed to put out? Like, were they kind of pushing you guys to be like more of a POD, or, you know, or what was that? Cause they couldn't have put out another Drawing Black Lines and like felt like they could market that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I remember feeling pressure directly from, you know, our A&R guy or anything like that, but it was definitely there. You know, it was, whether we brought it on ourselves or whatever, it was certainly there. I mean, Drawing Black Lines was like carefree and organic, and we were just doing whatever we want. And all of a sudden there's this new level of pressure to write some songs that are radio friendly, or, you know, are going to be more palatable for a bigger audience. And man, we worked on that record for, it had to be over a year of just writing, and just, we demoed like crazy on that album, like so many demos. And I don't even know how many songs we wrote, honestly, like, but it was a lot. And it was a totally different process.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, is like bands will write so many more songs than you hear. You know, and it's one of those like band could almost write an entire career's worth of material before they decide on that 10 songs or that 12 songs or whatever for the record.
Yep.
I remember I read a book recently, and I've talked to the drummer from Taproot, Jared Montague, and he had a very similar experience. With labels just being like they would write an entire record's worth of material, and they'd be like, "Nah, I think you guys should start over from scratch."
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy because I mean, even speaking of that, like, what was it? Oh yeah, we did like there was an idea at one point that they wanted to do a re-release of Drawing Black Lines.
Yeah.
And we went up to Vancouver again and recorded 3 songs that was meant to kind of be put back into Drawing Black Lines for this re-release that it never happened, obviously. But one of those songs was Spy Hunter.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that was recorded like way before. And then we re-recorded it for Truthless Heroes. And for some reason, I don't know why, we decided not to put it on the record. And so then that hung around all the way until Songs to Burn Your Bridges By. So you're right. Like you decide to keep certain songs, or, you make these decisions, but like there's so many cool songs. I think there was even more. There was a few B-sides from Truthless Heroes that ended up on Songs to Burn Your Bridges By.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. And I don't mean to move over Truthless Heroes or anything.
Sure.
But it is one of those records that, I mean, we listen to Truthless Heroes, and, me and my friend Buddy, whose name is actually Buddy, like it's on his birth certificate.
Okay.
He picked me up for school every morning. And so every single morning we had to drive to pick up his sister for school, and then we listened to Truthless Heroes for like 40. We listened to like basically the whole record every morning before going to school. And talk about a bum out. Like, what kind of mood do you have to be in after listening to that record and then going to school? It might explain why I was depressed for so many years, but like, but yeah, we would listen to that record, and like we loved it, even though like it wasn't as I guess hardcore, as Drawing Black Lines was, but. Like at the same time, we were listening to like tons of bands that were, had been heavier. Like I think even like at that point, like, some of the heavier bands had kind of gone a little bit more commercial, so it wasn't like a huge shock necessarily that like, okay, the next Project 86 record is this. But the thing that was the weirdest thing for us was that like, so it's like this grand concept album, which is weird because like a concept record isn't really like what what record labels want, it's not what they're looking for.
Certainly not. Let me ask you this: were you guys also crazy about Blindside at that time?
So Blindside was this weird thing, right? Because we thought that Blindside, we hadn't really heard much from Blindside. Like we were like card carrying members of the POD cult, at that time. And and honestly, we were card carrying members of the Schwab cult. I mean, it's one of those things where we were really into Blindside and stuff like that. But like, they hadn't, I think this was like, I could have my dates mixed up. Cause again, like you said, we're going back quite a while.
Yeah.
Like at least like 18 years at this point. But like, I remember we had heard Blindside Silence and we thought that was really cool. But some of the stuff that they had put out before that was like super hardcore. And I think at the time we were like, oh, this is so cool. Cause like, I do still think that Blindside record Silence was great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a fantastic record. But like, if you want to be a purist, you can be like, yeah, but that obviously doesn't sound like Blindside.
Right. Yeah. They kind of came into a whole different deal. That threw me off too, because we were buddies with them well before that. We did that Warriors tour with them and POD. Yeah. But we were kind of right around, they signed to Elektra and we were on Atlantic, and basically the Truthless Heroes and Silence, I think, came out almost around the same time because we toured with them to promote both of those records.
Yeah, because they were on you guys were on Atlantic and they were on Elektra, right?
Elektra, yeah.
So yeah, everybody was pushing for that whole thing. That was one of those weird things. That was a weird period in history, which I like to call the post 9/11 like Christian rock bump.
Right.
Because like it like famously POD's Satellite came out on September 11th, 2001. And but a lot of the like, the genre that we would refer to as like new metal, NU.
Yeah, sure.
that was kind of like the heyday. And like before that, you know, people, I always think it's funny. It's like in 2000, everybody thought that Limp Bizkit's Rollin' was a cool song. And then by like mid 2001, everybody's like, oh my God, Limp Bizkit's like a disease that needs to be eradicated, you know? But like, I remember Christian rock bands getting very popular during this time period. Because I think it was just because people were like down and out and they were looking for like a little bit of hope. And so, you know, obviously an album like Satellite was massive.
Oh, it's perfect.
Yeah, it was what everybody needed at the time.
They come out with, you know, Alive right after 9/11 about, you know, it's so positive and everything. And, you know, honestly, Truth Heroes is not a positive record.
Not even a little bit, dude. Yeah.
We kind of had bad timing in that sense.
Yeah, totally. Like, and it's so funny to me because, like, yeah, it was kind of a dark record or whatever when, like, even Blindside had kind of, like, prettied it up a little bit. But with Project, it was like, no, the world is a shithole, you know. Like, it just is what it is. And so yeah, that record had a very profound effect on me though, because if you got to think, as an angsty teenager, you know, at that time, I'm not into the positive POD stuff.
Sure.
And I'm not into the positive Blindside stuff. I mean, the Blindside came at it a little bit harder, I think, than POD did, but for the most part, it was just I was very much like, yeah, Project 86, Team Black for life, you know, like that sort of thing. Like the media is lying to us. It's like all this or whatever. And so we were like really, really into it. And then, you know, and then it was like, I remember very distinctly like going to project86.com because there used to be forums there that I was a part of.
Right.
Back when internet forums were a thing. And they were, you know, it was all very like quote unquote positive, you know, as positive as you can be for gathering around a record like that. And then one day I log into the site and it's all like, hey, we're no longer on Atlantic Records.
Yeah.
And we're putting out, we're putting our next record out like independently. But I never really got like the actual like story on that. So like, how does that happen without a record label just shelving your band? Because like I've interviewed a ton of bands and I've run into people that have just been like, yeah, they shelved us and then we just couldn't do anything else. So like, how did you guys escape that?
Well, yeah, no, you're right. We were lucky that Truthless Heroes came out and that it got its cycle and stuff, even though it didn't become as big as we had hoped. You're right. Like we were lucky it didn't just get shelved. And yeah, from what I remember, it's strange. It just kind of happened. Like our A&R guy, we started going into talks of like starting a new record and starting over. And then those talks kind of turned into, maybe you should do an EP and, you know, have this label or that label put it out in the interim. And it just kind of started getting weird. And then I was, at the time, I remember I was in the Netherlands. My wife is from Holland, and this is before we were married, and I was out there visiting her. And, you know, Alex, I got some email or something, hey, you got to give me a call. And said, yeah, Atlantic dropped us. That was it.
Wow.
But the silver lining of all of that is that got us out of our original Tooth and Nail contract, which was horrible.
Well, the Tooth and Nail contract, yeah, that's like what, 6 albums or something like that.
It was six records, and yeah, you know, half our publishing we didn't own, and you know, like, dude, I last thing I want to do is talk bad about Tooth and Nail. Like, we would have never been in any position to do anything if it weren't for Tooth and Nail. I'm first to admit that. You know, that was our platform, but that Atlantic era, they bought us out, and it was a lot of money.
Yeah. And
they bought us completely out, and then they dropped us. So it was like all of a sudden, like on one hand, our dreams kind of were shattered, or our hopes at that time that we'd kind of built up. But on the other hand, it's like, oh, we got a blank slate now. You know, we can do whatever we want, right?
Yeah, I mean, like a clean break. I mean, again, not very many bands get that clean break. So you guys put that record out independently. I actually don't have that version of it, but I think one of my co-hosts does have it. The original Songs to Burn Your Bridges by. And that's what's so interesting is what you say about the Tooth and Nail record, the Tooth and Nail contract being kind of like not that great. but then that record eventually ends up being released on Tooth and Nail.
Exactly. Yeah. It is funny. Like, yeah, they came back to, I forget who was our management at the time, and they had the best offer. And you know what? It's like that right around that time is when Tooth and Nail went to the next level, right? That was all of a sudden Under Oath's on the scene, and they're like, well, they have like gold records and stuff. Like Tooth and Nail was on another level, and it was the best option we had. And we kind of thought, yeah, let's do it. And that's where we ended up again. So yeah, it is ironic, but it worked out fine.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Like, because I remember being like really excited. I was like, oh, this is coming out on Tooth and Nail Records. And of course, like as the youth group kid that I was kind of still at that time, I was just like, yeah, it makes the most amount of sense. Like, why wouldn't they be on Tooth and Nail Records? And I remember seeing you guys open for Haste the Day at one point, and I was super excited about that. And it was so weird, how things changed, because I remember, like, if we go all the way back to 96 when we were first starting this conversation, like Tooth and Nail Records, like that was something you had to order out of like a catalog, or you had to go to a Christian bookstore, to buy records. Yep. And now I can buy brand new solid state releases for $7.99 on Tuesdays at Best Buy.
Yep. Right. Yeah. All of a sudden, that's true. Yeah, that was a big thing, is to be in the Best Buy circular. Like they'd pay a certain amount of money. It was a decent amount, and they would show up on that Sunday paper, and it really worked. It sold a lot of records when you were in that thing.
So the thing that I thought was interesting about Songs to Burn Your Bridges By is it was one of those, like, we'd heard, as fans, okay, we've separated from Atlantic Records, and we're going to put out our next record. And so of course, me and my meathead friends were just like, okay, so now they're going to do Drawing Black Lines, again, but it's going to be heavier. It's going to be like, be like brutal death metal Project 86, like obviously not, but like, it was just one of those like weird things where we were like, yeah, because I think at that time Tooth and Nail culture had gotten through us, fully. And so we were, really big fans of stuff like Norma Jean and Under Oath and Haste the Day and like all those heavy bands or whatever. But we always had kind of that special place in our hearts of like, we wouldn't have been listening to those heavier bands if we hadn't listened to Drawing Black Lines.
Right.
So like, there's a lot to that. But, what was interesting about that record is, as rebellious and angry as it is, it doesn't sound all that different than Truthless Heroes.
Yeah, it's kind of, the hangover of Truthless Heroes in a weird way. And like I said, we had, I would have to look to be completely accurate, but I think there was at least 3, maybe 4 songs on that record that were from the Truthless Heroes, either recording sessions or at least writing sessions. Like a lot of those songs were hanging around, and luckily Spy Hunter hadn't been used, so that made for the perfect opener of that record. So that's probably why it's not so wildly different. But and we went in and we recorded 3 songs with Aaron Sprinkle before releasing it on Tooth and Nail.
Yeah, those were the bonus tracks. It was like 3 Card and I can't remember what the other ones are right now.
Shadow on Me, right? Yeah.
I actually really like that one. Yeah, Shadow on Me. That's got a lot of Randy on it, and
a lot of Randy.
One of my favorite. that's one of my favorite things about the old Project 86 stuff is that it had a lot of Randy. His vocals seemed to really like kind of be a really good counterpoint to what Schwab was doing. And so I was like always really kind of into that, and I always loved that aspect of it. But the funniest story I have with Songs to Burn Your Bridges By, so like probably 6 days, I always bring up this, like when I saw you guys play with Haste the Day, I always bring this up because again, it was still like original project lineup and and all of that. And it was a great show. Like, even whenever, like, there's a video we released recently where I was like, yeah, I went and saw them. And my co-host was like, yeah, they opened for Haste the Day or whatever. And I was like, yeah, but I was only there to see Project, And I remember seeing that show, and I got a copy of Songs to Burn Your Bridges By. I bought it at the show, and got a bunch of t-shirts and all that. But like, and I think Schwab signed it, or somebody, like maybe you signed it. I don't remember who signed it. I have to look at it again, but it has like a bunch of signatures on it, typical fan of a band stuff, and so I went and saw that show, and I think it was probably like a week later, I was driving. My parents were out of town. I had a college course that I was supposed to go to, but at the time I was like really bad about actually attending my college courses. Because at the time, like I was in a band and like we were going to make it big and get signed to Solid State and all that. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because that happened. Right. But like, it's one of those things that I was like, yeah, no, it's fine. I'm going to go hang out at my girlfriend's house, who is that same girlfriend who is my wife now. But like, I was like, I'm going to go to her house, but I'm not going to drive my crappy car. I was driving like a Ford ZX2, like 1999, but I decided to drive my mom's brand new, like Ford 2000, whatever year that was. And it was raining outside and I was listening. So I was like jamming Songs to Burn Your Bridges by while I was driving to her house. And I think somewhere in the middle of Oblivion, I lost control of the car. And
no.
And dude, the car rolled like 3 times. And the whole time Oblivion's just blaring through my speakers like while I'm having this car accident. It was like a slow motion. Like if there had been cameras, that would have been like the perfect music video for that song. And I'm like totally freaking out or whatever. And then like I'm like sitting there, the car's upside down, and it gets to that part where Schwab's like, let go the anchor, let go the dead weight. And I had to like I was like pulling the seatbelt off of myself, and the CD's still playing even though the car's upside down. It was one of the wackiest experiences of my life, and I'll never forget that. And the crazy thing is like I had no injuries. I didn't break. I was the only person in the car, and the only injuries I got was like I cut myself a couple times when the firefighters had to break the back windshield to get me out. But it was just like one of the wildest experiences. And I remember because the CD was still in the car, and my dad, it's like 3 days later, my dad's like, the car's totaled, dude. Like you fucked up. Like, the car's totaled. Like, what are you doing? And I go, oh, is it totally totaled? Like, are we ever going to see it again? And he's like, why? And I was like, well, there's a CD in there that I want to get out.
Oh no.
And so I still have that Songs to Burn Your Bridges by Car Accident CD.
He made it, huh?
Yeah, he got it. He went and got it for me. He's a good dad. He knew that it was important to me, so he went and got it. And I was like, oh, sweet, but like, and as a kid, I didn't appreciate how much money my parents probably had to put up to fix that car.
That's crazy, man. That is really, you know what? I just was going through a bunch of boxes and stuff in my garage.
Yeah.
And I came across a bunch of the original independent release of Song to Burn Your Bridges by.
Oh, that's wild.
You have to get your address, man. I'll send you one.
Yeah, for sure, man. I'd be interested in
a car wreck over it.
Yeah, for sure. It was awesome. Like, it was just one of the best. Like, it's one of the worst experiences of my life, but one of the best. So, like, it was just, that record always cemented me. And, like, it was also one of those things where I was like, yeah, this band's got my back, man. I didn't even get hurt. I didn't even get hurt through all that, But, to bring it back to you, the interview's not about me, but, like, it's one of those, like,
that's more interesting than anything I've had to say.
No, I don't think so. That's one story. Okay. But, no, so like that record comes out, and I think that the band kind of more or less, and I could be wrong about this, but as far as the perception of the band goes, kind of more or less kind of recovered.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we kind of accepted our place in the world, I guess you could say. We grew to be okay with it, and the whole Atlantic thing was just, it was done. It was just kind of a chapter in the life of the band.
It was a pipe dream.
Pretty much.
But yeah, so like you guys put that record out, and then I remember actually one last thing about that stupid Haste of the Day show I keep talking about. That was in St. Louis, by the way. That's where I live. And
what venue, by the way?
I don't remember. If I'm being totally honest, it was not a venue that I remember going to very often. It might have been. It might have been the Creepy Crawl in St. Louis.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, I'm sure you've played with the Creepy Crawl before.
Yeah,
that was the big venue in St. Louis. St. Louis isn't really like great for music. And I remember that from being a band in St. Louis and trying to like play in St. Louis. We actually did better playing out of town than we did playing in our hometown.
Sure.
But I went and saw that show, and I remember actually I talked to Schwab after the show, and he was telling me about like the next record you guys were going to put out, and he was like, "Yeah, it's not going to be as musically safe as as songs to burn your bridges by. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that means, but okay, cool. Sign this record.
Interesting.
But
had we recorded it yet?
I don't know if you guys had or not. I don't remember how close that was to And the Rest Will Follow or not. But
okay.
But I do remember that record coming out, and I remember my friend Buddy, like, he bought that record before I did because he was like a major fan, and he was like, dude, listen to this album. And I remember that was the very first Project 86 album that I listened to that I was kind of like, there are some really cool songs on this record.
Uh-huh.
And then there are some songs that are kind of like, you know,
sure.
But I was like, this must be what he was talking about it not being as safe. So, like, what was it like going kind of into that? Were you guys trying to do something different there?
My main memory as far as the writing of that record is we made a concerted effort to write the music as a band, like jamming in a room, right? So there was a lot less, Steve wrote this song, here's the song, and let's work it out. It was more, at the most, hey, I got this riff, and then we would just sit there, and me, Randy, and Alex would just hash it out. And we were trying to go for a more organic, writing in the room part idea, and I think that comes through in the sense of those songs are, generally speaking, they're a lot longer.
Yeah,
and there's a lot more parts that came in and out, and that was due in large part to us just figuring them out by jamming as a band. So I remember that. But as far as like stuff that was outside the box or whatever unsafe or however it was worded, there wasn't a lot of like concept, at least with me, Randy, and Alex. It was really a lot of just whatever happened in that room, and that's cool. We like that. Let's do that. I know that doesn't give you much. But
no, it's fine. It's fine. Like, I mean, it is what it is, because it sounded like, to me, like it still sounded like the same band. Like it wasn't like you were like, okay, we're gonna go into this reggae section now, and right, hold that, and then we're gonna transition into like a ska section or like something totally off the wall, like you're just rolling a dice of like different styles, But yeah, I remember it being, kind of different, and that's not even like a criticism thing, because there's a lot of songs I like on that record. Specifically, like there's a song called I can't even remember what it now. Like it's not Sugar Cued no, it's Necktie Remedy. That song, like I got fired from a job during that, and like that song like literally like helped me deal with it. You know what I mean? Like because it was like there was like a real corporate job and all that stuff, and so like even the lyrics on that like kind of really kind of meshed with me and really in a really good way. But that song, that's actually a great example of a song like that would have never, I'm not saying it's so great or anything, but that would have never happened if I were to have written that song. Like there's just so many parts that come in and out, and it goes up and down, and it's it's in 5/4 half the time. Like that's Alex all the way. Like your total drummer guy. Like, dude, let's get out of 4/4. Let's do some weird time signatures. That's a good example, actually, of what I was talking about. Yeah, no, that's perfect. So you guys put out And the Rest Will Follow, and so like at what point, I guess, between that record and Rival Factions, did Alex leave the band?
Alex actually was involved in the really early stages of writing Rival Factions. He was, I want to say, a couple songs or so. And at that point, he had like school and he started, working full time, working on his career and stuff. So he actually didn't do a lot of touring on And the Rest Will Follow. And it was just kind of writing was on the wall, like he was ready to move on, and the logistics of doing another record with his schedule and that kind of thing was just not really going to happen. So it was pretty early on, but he was part of the first few songs we messed with for that record.
Okay, so he just ended up leaving like mid before you guys really got there.
Yeah, exactly. At that time, Randy had moved. He was living in Seattle, and he was working with Aaron Sprinkle and Tooth and Nail up there. And so we were pretty spread out during that record. So unlike And the Rest Will Follow, Rival Factions was really like hey, I have this song. And at that point, I'd gotten really into, audio production and that kind of stuff. And so I had capabilities of writing and recording a whole song by myself. And so that was kind of more of the process. And Randy, the exact same, right? So he was doing his own stuff and I was doing and then eventually we came together to work it out and finish the record. So.
Gotcha. Okay. And I totally missed this for whatever reason, but there's another band that you were in kind of before this, which was Crash Rickshaw. And
yeah.
So that was a record that me and my friend bought because we're like members of Project 86, sold, we got it, we're getting it. And that record I loved a lot actually. And kind of like opened me up to kind of more of this, cool. I really did like it. Even though I was like kind of a self-proclaimed like heavy music person at the time. That record is still like kind of still has that heaviness to it, but it's the vocals are like just absolutely ethereal. You know what I mean? Like just really much more dynamic, I think, than what we were used to in Project 86. So that was really cool because like I could tell that like it was the same people writing it. But it was very I love that record. I can't like say that enough. That record was absolutely kind of a hidden gem for me. That's
great to hear. I appreciate that. That was just, gosh, do you happen to know what year that first thing came out? I'm trying to think.
2001
project.
It was between. I think it was between.
So it was right after Drawing Black.
Yeah,
Lines.
It was between Drawing Black Lines and Truthless Heroes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Joby, who sang on that, he was a longtime friend, Joby, and we could sing and stuff. And so just an idea, me and Alex were like, oh, let's just do a band. And Project was doing really well at the time. So Brandon Evil was like, oh, you're doing a side project? I'll put it out. Yeah, no problem. And so we wrote that thing so quick and recorded it so quick. And it sounds pretty terrible, but kind of in a cool way. But that was really fun. That was coming from, we're really going for like kind of like a more post-hardcore, more melodic thing. And we just kind of let it go how it went. There wasn't much preconception with that thing. We just kind of went for it.
Yeah, no, it was cool. It was really cool. It was different than what I was used to at the time because I hadn't really listened to much post-hardcore like sort of stuff then. I remember just being like, oh yeah, it's like some of the dudes from, and of course I say some of the dudes from Project 86, but it basically was Project 86 with a different vocalist,
that first record was just me and Alex, and then Randy started playing with us after that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But yeah, it was definitely, it was definitely cool. I just wanted to make sure I added that kind of in the timeline. But so Alex left kind of somewhere in the beginning stages of Rival Factions, and then you guys put that record. And of course, talking about a record that sounds vastly different than anything else that had come before it. Where was the band's kind of mindset at that time as far as like what type of direction you were kind of looking to go in?
For me, it was just kind of a thing of like, okay, we've been doing somewhat of the same thing, give or take some variation for, at that point, quite a long time, right? And just wanted to do something different. It just really felt like the time to kind of come out of left field with something different, just for the sake of trying something new, really. I mean, it wasn't this big concept that was predetermined. It was just kind of the stuff I was writing and that Randy was writing. And I think after Alex left, it was almost like it seemed appropriate to try something different, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I felt that even after writing one record. Like I wrote one record with my band and then I was like, man, I really want to do something different. So I can only imagine after like a extended period of time of writing and touring and kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again, that you'd kind of want to do something a little bit outside of the box.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. Yeah, that's pretty much where we were coming from.
Yeah, so like that record came out, and then I guess it was during that time. I'm picking my words very carefully here, but like during that time, you guys basically, like I know Randy kind of left. I guess it was probably after Rival Factions. And I'm trying to remember if you were still there for Picket Fence Cartel, because I remember seeing I went and saw the Scream the Prayer tour, which was at that was at Foo Bar in St. Louis.
Yes, I was there.
Yeah, you were there.
Yeah.
But I think you were playing guitar, if I'm right.
Yes.
Yeah, you were playing guitar
Correct.
for that record,
Yeah.
and or for that tour, and so like that was one of the things where I was like, what, it's weird because yeah, you and Schwab were the only people that I recognized, on that tour.
Yeah.
And
that's absolutely right.
okay. So you were doing so Randy left and then you just stuck with it for like what, one more album or?
Yeah, so we were for Picket Fence, we were writing that whole record, and it was like actually kind of towards the tail end of writing that record that Randy he rolled. He wanted to move on and he was done, right? So I was just kind of there, and I'm like, oh, like what happened? Like this isn't good. And but it's all I had done as my entire adult life.
Right.
At that point, that's all I had done was toured, and right. So I didn't know what else to do. So it's like, okay, I guess we're gonna finish this record. But the whole record kind of fell on me and Schwab's shoulders, and especially me in the sense of like I recorded most of it, and I ended up playing guitar on it and bass, and trying to grab stuff from Randy from demos, because I'll be the first to admit, like, Randy's a rad guitar player, and like, even if it's something simple, he's going to play it completely different than I play it, so that wasn't and so we did that record, and then they did that tour you mentioned was literally 9 weeks long. Like, that was a long one, and it was, for me personally, it was a really bad time in my life. Like, all the dudes are gone, and the reason I was on guitar is because we couldn't find a guitar player that would, play the songs right.
Sure. Yeah.
So it was like, okay, we knew this guy who played bass, and he was great. But I'll do my best playing guitar, and that, at least for me, that was kind of the beginning of when it was like, this isn't the same thing. This is different, and yeah, that's kind of where it ran its course for me. And somewhere in that touring cycle is when I decided to leave myself.
Yeah, because I mean, at some point you're kind of looking around and you're like, where is everybody? Like,
yeah, it was tough. Yeah, it was tough, and and at the same time, like I was recently married, and it's like, I didn't want to be gone for 6 weeks or 9 weeks or whatever it was at a time. And it kind of just stopped making sense for me at that point.
Sure. And so like you leave the band, and was the band basically like your full-time job before that? Or were you like taking time off from work to tour?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At that point I was trying to, I was making some supplemental money, like, recording and
of course,
and doing some things with other bands and stuff, but that was really the main deal. So
okay, so like, you'd said you'd been married, so like, what's that phone call like driving home? Like, yeah, so I'm not gonna keep doing this, and I'm gonna end up like doing whatever. Like, what was the kind of idea there as far as like, what am I gonna do now?
Right. Funny you should ask. Like, my wife, actually, if you were to ask her now, would say, it's all water under the bridge now. But like, to be honest, one of my biggest regrets was I wish when Randy said, you know what, man, I'm done, I should have rolled with him. Because I was really unhappy doing it, and so she was happy that I was quitting, and she was going to say, yeah, you should have done this a year ago, basically. So
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And the brutal truth of it is like, the money from touring, especially at that time, kind of the level we were at that time, it was enough to live on and stuff. But like, in my older adult self, I'm looking back and it's like, I could have worked at Starbucks and it would have been the same money. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, it wasn't, in other words, if you're not happy doing it and you're not loving it, it's a bad choice. So
for sure. Yeah, for sure. I've been in that situation myself with jobs and stuff, like, why am I working my hands to the bone here when I could go over somewhere else and do less work and make the same, if not more money, like, yeah, totally. That's totally
exactly.
Relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. At the same time, like, I knew I wasn't like quitting music, right? I knew I would always do music and that would always be there. I was deciding to leave music as a career that I depend on to support myself and my family. So yeah, there's a big difference, at least for me.
So after that point, like where did you, I mean, obviously we kind of know, anybody that can read Wikipedia knows kind of like what went on next, but actually I haven't read that Wikipedia article in a while. So I'm just going to ask you, since you're here, what was
I haven't either.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Did you know you have a Wikipedia page? You do. It's, I don't remember. Was it Starflyer next?
Actually, I was playing with Jason in Starflyer since 2006.
Okay, yeah, that's where my timeline's a little bit confused, because that's obviously, like, I mean, to me, like that's a huge step from you know, where you you had come from. So you were jamming with Starflyer before that. So like how does something like that come about? I mean, Starflyer is one of my favorite bands as well. So like I'm a little bit of a tooth and nail kid at heart. So like, you know, Starflyer's got that special place for me.
Oh, absolutely, man. Yeah. So yeah, I knew Martin from like forever ago. You know, back in those days, like all the tooth and nail bands, if you're at you know, Cornerstone, you're all intermingled, right? And you became friends with a lot of them. So I knew him from quite a while back, and then he was in him and Dirk from Stavesacre had this band called The Emergency.
Okay.
And this was like, oh man, somewhere around Truthless Heroes era. We were on Atlantic, and it was rad. And so I showed John Rubley, our A&R guy, like, you got to check this out. And this was when like the Hives and White Stripes were huge, right? And it was kind of in that garage rock vein.
Yeah.
And so Atlantic actually signed them, and they made a whole record. But like we were talking about before, it got shelved and no one ever heard it.
Yeah.
And so
very common story.
That reconnected me with Martin. Yeah. So, and I was just hanging out at his house, and he was showing me some, I think early Neon Horse stuff, and I just played bass on it, and he was just stoked. He's like, I never, had like a really like legitimate bass player and all that, and so that just kind of just happened. And he said, "Oh, dude, he was working on 2006. That would have been My Island. That's the record.
Yeah,
that's the first record I played on, and then
great record.
Yeah, and then since then up till now, how many? 1, 2, 3.
It's a lot of albums and a lot of EPs.
7 records, something like that.
Yeah, it's a whole career's worth of material.
Yeah.
Like there's no way to slice that up any other way. Like it's a lot, and that was kind of one of the coolest things, for me, coming off of being a Project fan and like realizing that like, oh, okay, I've got a little bit of, because like your bass playing, as far as like, I don't necessarily say the tone or whatever, but it's always very like, I can always kind of tell it's you. Not that you're a one-trick pony or anything like that, but it's just like, basically, I hate to say it, but like any band where I can actually hear the bass player playing, I actually have to look in the liner notes and be like, oh, okay, yeah, it's okay, so it's Steven. That makes tons of sense now.
I appreciate that, man. That's nice.
I had a friend that unfortunately he was going to co-host with me tonight, but was unable to make it for whatever reason. And he was a bass player himself, and he whenever we used to play live shows and stuff, he would try to emulate your tone as much as humanly possible, because he's just like, this isn't, more specifically, like for him, it was the Drawing Black Lines tone. He wanted to, because we were in a hardcore band. So like, he was like, I need to have the most like brutal bass possible. And in his mind, the most brutal bass possible was the Drawing Black Lines bass, but you can still hear it too, especially if you listen. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you're good.
It's actually on that record is a bizarre bass tone, actually.
Yeah.
Like it's all like low mids, because there were so many damn guitars
right, yeah.
that the guitars were filling up all the low end. And so it's actually a really peggy mid, like, yeah, pretty crazy bass sound, actually. And again, it wasn't really that intentional. It just kind of happened.
Sure, yeah. Well, for him, it was like a guidebook on how to be brutal on bass. Like it was his whole deal.
Okay.
Yep. I remember him and I sat up for like 4 hours one night, like playing with. We had like one of those pod effects, and we're going through the pod. There's like 900 different bass effects, and we're like trying to figure out exactly how to get that exact sound Because it's funny because like we'd play the record and then we'd stop it and then we'd like, like it was this whole thing. And I think the transition over into something like Starflyer and even like Neon Horse probably the weirdest band I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And Mark Solomon's one of the weirdest dudes that I can imagine in my life. It fit like a glove, man.
It's the Neon Horse is probably the most polarizing band I've ever been a part of. People either love it or they cannot stand it.
Well, it's like if you like new wave, then like you're gonna have a great time.
Yeah, and Solomon's doing weird stuff. Man, honestly, that first Neon Horse record, that's the most fun I ever had making a record. It was just a blast. It's just a ridiculous record, but I really had fun doing that.
Well, and so your main gig kind of going on was Starflyer. And so I assume you were doing like Neon Horse, like kind of on the side from doing that.
Yeah, but that's also Martin, right? Neon Horse. So like it was almost one and the same in a weird way. We were recording at his house the same way we did with Starflyer, and it was a similar process, just a different band. So yeah, that almost was a Starflyer record in a really weird way because it was still a Martin record,
Gotcha. Okay, so like when did it, like, because I know Neon Horse I guess is more or less not an active thing anymore, or maybe it is, I don't know, but I'm just guessing.
No.
So like White Lighter.
No, we played it. Yeah, so that was oh man, what year was that? 2000.
You're asking the wrong guy. I still think 2010 was last
something
year.
Like that. Yeah, right. So that was just same kind of thing. I just wanted to do a record. And Solomon, like that's the problem is there's a shortage of singers. And Solomon is just a guy I've known forever, and so we did that. Basically for fun. That record didn't have a big footprint at all. It was limited in its exposure and stuff. It was really more of a passion project, and just something fun to do with him.
Gotcha. Well, it's cool. I mean, having Mark on anything. I mean, the dude's a Swiss Army knife of a vocalist.
He is. He is. Yeah.
He can do pretty much anything. I remember just thinking that was the weird. I think I heard Neon Horse on. It must have been like on a Tooth and Nail compilation or something like that. And I remember thinking it was the weirdest thing I'd ever heard in my life. Because at the time, I was still like, yeah, it's not heavy, it's not good, like.
Right.
But once I hit 30, for whatever reason, like all these bands that I hadn't really given a chance before and written off, I was just like, oh, okay, this is actually like really cool. Like,
yeah, funny how that happens, right?
Yeah, definitely. But like as a career musician, like what have you got kind of going on in the present day?
So right now we actually just finished another Starflyer record.
Nice.
that just got done, and I think that would probably. I think this year. I'm guessing it would come out. And
okay.
That one, Jason decided to work with T.W. Walsh. He was in Pater Lion.
Okay.
For a while, way back in the day, and so he was a big part of that. It's like kind of remotely because he's in Massachusetts, and Martin would send him the songs, and then he would kind of rearrange and add keyboards, and he ended up mixing it. And I would actually call him the producer of the record, TW. So it's a different record. It's a different sounding record. So that was really fun to do. It was kind of outside the box for Jason a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, that just came or will come out. Actually, it's funny you should ask. We've been playing around with the idea of doing a Neon Horse EP just for the fun of it, just to kind of bring it back for no good reason.
Yeah, hey. I think that was the whole point of Neon Horse in the beginning was you didn't ask for it, but here it is.
Exactly, right. But that's the thing, I think that's why me and Martin have worked together for so long. Like, it's really about creativity and more than anything, enjoyment, just having fun. Like, we're not relying on it to live. And that was the biggest breath of fresh air after leaving Project, as far as like, oh, that's my job. And that's it. There's pressure on how you write songs because you got to please fans, and then you're worried about, and then you got to do this, you got to do that. Like, as soon as you're not relying on it to make money, it's kind of like such a refreshing thing that you enjoy it again.
For sure.
And so that's kind of why I think the two of us have. Yeah, and to be clear, Starflyer, that's Jason's band. Like he's the songwriter. I'm not writing anything. I'm giving ideas, and you'll bounce stuff off of me and come up with bass parts and stuff. But obviously, he's the dude with that. So
for sure.
I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah,
I mean, I think anybody that's a Starflyer fan kind of knows that. It's not like. It's not any kind of big secret. Right. I don't know why people would keep big secrets about whether they were the sole member of something. But anyway, I do think that it's been super cool, and seeing kind of what you've done, and kind of seeing what Randy has done. And I think Alex is the only one that's kind of a big picture, a big kind of question mark for me, because the last I heard from Alex that he was doing something with Focused, but I think that was a long time ago. Like I said, I'm so out of the loop as far as current music news goes.
I forgot.
It is really hard to remember exactly where everybody is and what they're doing. But do you still keep up with Alex?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, me, Alex, and Randy we're all close, man. We're constantly in contact and stuff. And ironically, actually, Alex played on that first Neon Horse record. That was him on drums.
That's right. I should know that. I
brought him to. I
spun that record today.
Oh no, it's fine. Yeah, and it's weird, but me and Alex have jammed just recently. We were toying around with some stuff. Nothing really came to fruition with it, but it was fun nonetheless. We were playing heavy stuff and kind of revisiting kind of some of that kind of style and stuff, but no real clear intentions of any project or anything. It was more just to do something.
I think that's super cool that you guys are still friends, all friends and getting along, and there doesn't have to be any drama associated with it, and that's what you want, in the sense
absolutely,
of, your friend, you've been with these people since high school, so it's really hard. I think, even for me keeping up, that's part of the reason why we started this podcast was my co-host Joe, him and I have been friends since high school, and we played in a couple bands together, and we did things kind of over the years, but it was one of those things where I'm if we want to do this creative podcast thing, I couldn't think of anybody better to go to, as far as bouncing ideas and doing something creative. So this is cool, and this is what I think. This is where I'll probably wrap up. But real quick, I got some messages earlier today, and I had kind of told people that we were going to be talking tonight. So I want to kind of see, some people wanted me to ask you some questions. And I want to make sure I at least I want to make sure I get at least one of them in. I'm trying to be a little bit more interactive here. Let me see here.
There you go.
I'm gonna read, because some of these we may have already answered. Yeah, because one of them was, why did everybody leave the band in the same year time frame? We kind of already talked about that.
Well, it's funny actually, because it wasn't the same year at all. That's just kind of because it was never really put out there to the public that we had left officially. There was never an official statement for all three of us.
Right.
It just kind of happened, and it never talked to it. Yeah. So it was spread out. It was close, but it was within a couple years.
Sure. One of the questions is super controversial, so I'm probably not going to read it. But the other one is, one of them was, would you ever entertain rejoining or playing with Project again? If not, would you do something with Crash Rickshaw?
Yeah, that rejoining Project thing I don't see happening. Because, it would have to be all the original dudes and that kind of thing. I don't really see that happening. But Crash Rickshaw, sure. We actually did record some stuff a few years ago and kind of tried to write some new songs, but nothing really came of it. But Joby's he's been one of my best friends for years and years and years. So I wouldn't put that out of the question at all. I think it'd be fun. I would totally be open to doing that.
I know there's some people that are stoked for it. There's been a little bit of talk.
Yeah, that's good to hear, actually.
Yeah.
I kind of assumed nobody cared, to be honest with you.
Well, after recent events and announcements or whatever, people kind of started, I feel thinking about Crash Rickshaw again, and they're like, well, If those guys got together and did that, that would be super cool.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was kind of like like by association sort of thing, where it was all like, well, if we can't get them for this one thing, it'd be really cool if we got them for this other thing. So that's something that something that even made me kind of go back and listen to that record and then the record. Well, it wasn't. I don't know if it was a full length record that came out later on in 2008, which I think was like a digital only sort of thing. Unless it's not, in which case you need to send me one. No,
that was only digital.
Yeah, I think that was iTunes only, if I remember correctly. Which I probably have that. Yeah. I have that sitting around on a hard drive somewhere. But yeah, so this is super cool, man. These are the kind of autobiographical questions I like to, or like autobiographical sort of episodes that I like to do, because it gives a really clear picture on kind of what it's like, because one of the biggest things for me is like I'm a guy that did music for a while, but just didn't, for whatever reason, it just didn't work out, so it's always super inspiring to see, like, even when somebody's in a band that's kind of more popular, leave that band and then end up still having a full career after that. And I think that that's super, super inspiring, and something that I feel like people can latch onto, that maybe when the thing that they're doing ends, or they decide that they can't continue with it for whatever reason, that there is still kind of hope to continue on and do the thing that they love.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. But
yeah, there's this is the part of the interview where I'm like, hey, do you have any questions for me? I'm just kidding. But yeah, man, no, I appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. And, maybe sometime down the road, I can have you pick a band, and, we could talk about a band that you like and are passionate about, and we can talk about all their records. I think that'd be super fun. I would love to do that. I think that's a great concept for that podcast you have. I think that'd be fun to do. Yeah, it's a ton of fun for me. Like, the main reason I started it was because whenever I got kind of in a little bit older, I didn't have as much time to listen to music. So it gives me kind of an excuse to be like, oh, well, I have to go back and listen to all these bands so that, so that, number one, that I remember it, that I absorb it. But now it's like I have an official thing to tell my wife, yes, I'm doing this on official business, So. Right. Has anybody picked a band that has just an insanely giant catalog that really screwed you as far as trying to become familiar with all of it? Yeah. I don't really want to get into that, but yeah, like I did have a guest at one point pick a band very late in our communication period, and ended up I had to spend like the entire day researching the band because I was not familiar with their catalog really at all. I'd say one of the biggest ones we had. I don't know if you ever heard of the As the Story Grows podcast. We had the host from that podcast on to talk about a band called Death. Not a band called Death, but the band Death, like the death metal band from Florida. Yeah. And I remember that one being kind of a bigger catalog. And I think we ended up just kind of like bullshitting the entire time, though, and didn't really even talk about the band. That was when we were like brand new and didn't really know what we were doing. But that was a big one. I think some of the biggest discographies we've done, we did Napalm Death, which had a lot of records. And then we did KMFDM, the industrial band. We did them for our 200th episode, and that was like 21 records. That was rough. I mean, my gosh. That was probably the hardest one that we've done. Because like industrial music is awesome, but it's not I can imagine. It's not big on variety. So yeah, it was a lot. But yeah, we've done some massive discographies for sure. That's really funny. Steven, I want to thank you so much, man, for taking an hour and a half out of your night and kind of reminiscing a little bit. And I'm sorry if I didn't prepare you for like how deep we were going to go. But no problem. Thank you for having me. Yeah, absolutely, man. This was a lot of fun. And that was my chat with Steven Dail, formerly of Project 86, formerly of Bloodshed, formerly of Innermeans, formerly of so many of my favorite bands, and currently of Starflyer 59. this was a bucket list interview, and I was really, really excited to get to do it and get to talk to Steven and get his perspective on the origins of Project 86. It's kind of nice to hear that story from a different point of view every now and again. So that was really refreshing, and I hope you guys really enjoyed it as much as I did. And I can tell you, if you enjoyed this interview, I've got a lot of stuff lined up for 2021 that you guys are going to find unbelievable. I find it unbelievable. Just did an interview the other night with every member of Travail. Well, mostly every member. There were a lot of guys in that band, but I got at least like a solid 4 of them on one interview. And there will be a video of that. 2021 is going to be awesome, guys. Make sure you're following us on all of our social media platforms. We're a lot of places now. You can go to facebook.com/discography discussion. You can tweet at us at discussmetal on Twitter. You can send us a message or give us a follow on Instagram, also at discussmetal. You can follow me personally on Twitter at discussmetaldan. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/discussmetaldan. You can find me on YouTube now under Discuss Metal Dan, and definitely make sure you're following that YouTube page, because we are starting to post actual videos of us recording episodes of Discuss Metal, recording episodes of Discography Discussion. And if you're a Patreon supporter, you're going to get access to all of that stuff early. But if you're not, it's not a big deal, because as soon as those audio podcasts are available for you to listen to, you can go check the YouTube channel and you'll be able to watch the videos that go along with those episodes as well. The videos are fun. A lot of them are uncut, uncensored, unedited. They're just raw. And I personally get a kick out of watching stuff like that and comparing it to the edited final product. So if you guys want to see more content like that, definitely make sure to let us know. And we've got a great year lined up for you this year. So thank you guys so much that have supported us in the past, and I can't wait to share some of this stuff with you guys in the future. I'll see you next time.
This has been Discuss Metal with Stephen Dail of Starflyer 59. Presented by discussmetal.com.